The Last of Us Part 2. Let's talk about it. Oh man, so what's up? We have a lot to discuss about in this one. And I want to talk about it not so much as a game, as you know on this channel. I'm going to talk about it from a narrative perspective, from a storytelling perspective, and sort of my thoughts on its approach. So off the top, if you know anything about The Last of Us, the show, the games, you've likely heard some chatter online and maybe elsewhere about the divisiveness of the second installment of the Naughty Dog game. Having experienced it now myself, I just recently finished it a number of days ago, just before, I think around the time I finished the end of The Last of Us television show on HBO Max. And so having experienced that story and know the major beats, I can understand the divisiveness. And I think that's likely due to the narrative choices it makes. If the first game was bold, I think, then the second game is extra bold. And what I mean by that is that it's not afraid to take risks. And I think any story that does that is always better. Even if you don't like it, I think that's what's best for the story. I think if stories do what we expect them to do, they become just that, stories that we expect, and they don't give us anything exciting or surprising or really thought-provoking in that way. We can appreciate the ways the different story approaches a well-tread area, something that's well-worn that we know. But if there's nothing bold about it, it's hard for us to really remember a lot about it, I think. And that's why with a story like The Last of Us Part 2, say what you will if you don't like it, but it's memorable. And it's got the guts to really, take some real risks with its characters and with the way it tells its story. And so now my overall feeling about the narrative of The Last of Us 2 is, it's as a storyteller myself, I love experiencing stories like that, even if I don't like the direction they're going in. There's something about it that always gets me to think about how I approach my stories and what I love about experiencing stories, what I love about having stories told to me. I'm a fan of well thought out, well told stories. Just just someone who just can listen to those stories often and appreciate the craftsmanship and the work that goes into telling stories like that. So off top, again, I had some things about it that I didn't like, but ultimately, I think it's a strong narrative, and I think based on that, it's a win. The Last of Us 2 wins. The thing that probably disappointed me the most, though, I think, is it feels like there's less time spent with Ellie than there should be. Now, I'm not saying we don't take away time and spend time with Abby, because I think that's important. No matter how much I didn't like that at first, I was like, this is whack. And if you don't know, so I'm not going to spoil anything here. Abby makes some decisions and stuff that affects characters that we came to love from the first story, the first installment. And that may put you at odds with this character. It did for me, and I didn't want to care about her. I was like, F Abby, she's whack, blah, blah, blah. If you don't like The Last of Us 2, you're likely in the same camp. However, what happened was I grew to care about Abby, as one does when you experience a story like this. And it felt more like the overall experience. Not only obviously feels like a movie, but it also felt like a book, felt like a novel, like where one of those novels where novels sometimes can have perspective shifts. You have a story being told from the main character's perspective. And if it's a third person story, if it's, in other words, if it's not a first person story, first person omnipotent or omniscient, I'm still, if it's not that kind of story, there is freedom to explore the narrative from different viewpoints. Different characters can come in and you will experience the story through their eyes. And I think the case is the same with The Last of Us Part 2. You have a significant chunk of the story devoted to Abby, who is our antagonist, but then she becomes the protagonist, and we then get to see her journey of the story. And then what you end up coming with before the story goes back to Ellie is that you see that Abby and Ellie are essentially the same. You are seeing the story from two perspectives distinctly, and how the world they're living in has affected them, how much they've lost, and how they go about dealing with that loss, and how they try to carve out a life in the midst of that. And ultimately, it's very well executed, I think. And as I'm talking about, I'm thinking about the more thrilling parts of the story. You know, you're running through a hallway, or there's some, which is something that I don't know that this was in the first game as much, where you're playing a part where you're going into like between enclosed spaces, like claustrophobic spaces where you have to slide through. And the way the game camera shoots that, I think if they were to make a movie about it, or when they do season 2, I don't know that they'll do this, but I feel like it would add just that much more electricity to have a camera sort of over the shoulder shot or behind the back when they're running through and trying to escape clickers or runners, or just trying to get through tight spaces where the camera can catch that, and it puts you right in the action. You're trying to get back, and you're sliding through these enclosed spaces where you got the camera's real tight, and you got this is the window you got this. Anyway, I thought that was kind of cool. It's obviously, that's cool to see that stuff in the game, and when you're playing it, it becomes that much more visceral. And I think watching something like that it is similar. And I think what it reminds me of, if you've seen Sam Mendes' film 1917, the film is obviously like a continuous, like a one take shot, or it's made to look like that. You're put in the action of that film all the way. Like when bombs are dropping, the characters move, whoever you're following, it's that kind of situation, but more compact, because you're in the trenches. You get to see people, the camera's following you all the way through. And I think, and again, not that they'll do this, they probably won't do this for The Last of Us Season 2, but I just think in my headcanon of my imagination of what a film of this story would look like, a live action version of the story would look like, they would have shots like that in it. It makes it more visceral and puts you right in there. Last of Us 2 is awesome, and I've been thinking about it. Again, I finished it, I can't remember, a while ago, probably about a week ago or more, and it's been sitting with me more so than, now part 1 hit me too, and I was, especially that last act, the last third was really, it stuck with me. But this second one, it's such a rich narrative and a rich experience, and I think again, I said I'm gonna get a PS5 just for this game. It was that engaging, and I appreciated how it handled its characters, and it didn't treat the characters like lightly. There was a consequence to character actions, and it doubled down on its decisions. And there was no backtracking. There was no like fake outs when certain decisions were made. And I really appreciated that. I think the other thing it reminded me of, as I'm talking about it, if you've seen Avatar: The Last Airbender, the television show, and what an amazing show that is. And then of course there was The Legend of Korra, the sequel series. Now, a lot of people, myself included, I didn't like Legend of Korra as much as I liked The Last Airbender. I think The Last Airbender is a superior show, but I do like The Legend of Korra. I just didn't like it as much as The Last Airbender. And what I will say about The Legend of Korra is that, again, like The Last of Us 2, The Legend of Korra takes real risks with its narrative, with the mythos, with the characters, and it doesn't shy away from major decisions it makes. For instance, breaking the connection to past avatars. That's a major decision that changes the whole. It changes everything for Korra, and how she has to sort of figure things out really on her own. She's got her crew with her, but she doesn't have the avatar connection anymore. So that's a major thing that every past avatar for thousands of years have had, and Korra is the first one to not have that. Which on one hand you can say that's a problem. Why would you have this character, be cut off from the past avatars and stuff? It's just, as a woman, as a character who represents the LGBT community, all these different things where you could look at that as a negative, but it's actually, there's something again very bold on behalf of the storytellers. And when you have the guts to take something that's established, something that's so well beloved, and really shake it up, I always respect something like that. I know I go like, man, dang, I would be, if I ever made something like that, I'd be like, you got to really think about not just changing stuff, but if it'll make the story better, I don't see why, what's the problem with that? You have to feel something about that, though. I feel like as the creative of that thing, I don't know. I don't know. I can't speak for them, but I know that's something that I think about when I'm thinking about stories that I want to tell. And The Last of Us 2 does this. It takes real risks, and it stands behind those decisions. And I think you have to respect that. Any story that does that, that has my respect. I guess what I'm getting at is, if you know what's up with Last of Us 2, I want to hear your thoughts. Because I'm anxious to have discussions with other people about the story. Because that's really what I think, gameplay and everything aside. I mean, obviously I know it's a game, but for me, with things like that, the thing that's always really hit me is the narrative, like the story, how engaging the story is. But gameplay seems to be just sort of like a byproduct of that. Like, you're building the gameplay. I don't know. I'm not a game designer, but for me, it feels like my way in is the story, and gameplay feels like it's built. It's comes in. It's built around the story. You have things happening as a result of plot points, and as a player, you respond to those things that take place in the story, because that's where all your actions are hinged upon. They're hung upon major plot points. You have Ellie in this story whose goal ends up being revenge because of something that happened in the story. Like, the narrative did something, and now your character has to respond to that narratively. Abby, same thing. Her whole situation, Abby's unique because in that way, because she started out as coming from a place of revenge. That was what her arc was. And then it went from revenge to redemption because, again, something else happened in the narrative that caused a shift in how she sees what she's doing and how she moves in the world or whatever it is. So I always see that kind of stuff as like, everything else, the narrative comes first and everything else grows out of that. If it's a particularly strong narrative, those things are going to, gain the most points for me. And so I thoroughly enjoyed the story, and I can appreciate too, in a lot of ways, it's longer than The Last of Us, than the original Last of Us. It's chock full of action and stuff, but it's also chock full of quiet moments, which I think the first of us has this, the first game has this too, but the second game feels like there's a lot more space, like it's just more of everything. Like which is like this, which I don't always like the notion of more when it comes to sequels, where it's like you got the first thing and it's great, and the sequel just gives you more of the same stuff, because that doesn't always work, I don't think. And I think it can, depending on how it's executed. And I think in this case, it does more, but it does so that's not sort of like it's all over the place and it's all in your face, and like you can't enjoy it in the same way. I think I think the fact that there is more gives you, as the audience member, the player, the person experiencing the story, more to digest, more to work with. It gives you more time in the world, more time around these characters that you've grown to love. And that's never a bad thing. It's when it's executed poorly that it feels, or not calibrated properly, is where it can feel like a little bit of a disappointment. Like if there's more action, because for the sake of action, oh, we need more action, we need more zombies, we need more, and that's all you have, that can be disappointing. If you're going to at least do that, balance it out with more character stuff, more narrative, more, more introspective things, more ways for us to connect to the characters, more ways for us to care about what's happening. That, to me, is always going to win. And I think The Last of Us 2 does that. The Last of Us 2 is a fantastic narrative, and I think it inspires me to, as a storyteller, to think about that. Like the ways in which you can take risks and not really care about audiences' opinions about what is it going to be like. Because you can't really when you're doing that kind of thing. And I think similarly, the reason why this hits me so hard, I'll let you guys in on a secret, in case for those of you who don't know. So I wrote a book, came out a couple years ago, called Dragon Daughter, right? And I had some people who had read the book who liked it, and so I originally wasn't planning on writing a sequel. But there is a sequel that's written, and my concern immediately was like, can I make it as good as the first one? Can I make it feel like how I felt about the first one? It's longer than the first book. I'm actively working through edits and things right now. I have a meeting with my editor next week to talk about first round's edits, talk about what do I actually have, and I'm thinking about were there any risks taken? How bold was I in the story, in the way that not just for the sake of being bold, but am I doing what's best for the story? And I think The Last of Us 2 is a good sort of benchmark, I think, and stories like it that aren't afraid to challenge an audience's understanding of the story and your own understanding. I think when you take risks, I think as a creator, you're challenged too. How do you feel about the risk you're taking? This is something that I'm also thinking about too. So I think coming across The Last of Us 2 is fortuitous. The timing of it feels right, that I've experienced it when I did, because again, it's in my system right now. I really wanted to talk about it because I've been thinking about it. I've been doing drawings on it. You'll see, I made some sketches and things. I was just sort of inspired by the story. And that's what brought me to this conversation here. So I told you I was doing sketches and stuff, right? So I wasn't playing around. This is how inspired I was by the story. I was just so taken with it. And I just, you got firefly situations, you got some moths and junk going on, Ellie, which I love that character, by the way. I'm such a fan of Ellie as a character. And I think Ashley Johnson, I just have to take some time to single out Ashley Johnson. I've been watching a lot of videos, interviews and stuff with her and Troy Baker. I just think that Ashley Johnson is charming. She's as charming as all get out. If she just voiced like a solo thing of just a story of just Ellie, I'm down for that. Yeah, that's it, man. If you've hung out this long, listening to my rambling about the story and The Last of Us, and thank you for taking the time to do that. And I urge you, please comment below if you have any thoughts, because I really want to engage in this conversation. I need some other people to talk to about this. I can't talk to my certain family members and stuff because they haven't seen it yet, and they haven't really experienced the show, so I can't talk The Last of Us to really a whole but too many people. So let me know what's up. And then come on back because we got some more videos to talk about. All right, I'm out of here. See ya.